very important. Everything else we've been doing is great. It's emotional. It's wonderful, and we needed that. This is something we need to understand, and it's going to help us, and it's going to help Libya. So I want to welcome to the podium Sayyid Fadel Lamen, who has been a president of the American Libyan Council and has been also advising the Libyan Transitional Council on and government on governance, transition, and democracy and national reconciliation. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Fadel Lamen.
Assalamu alaikum. طبعا it's very hard to talk about very serious and important problems. Can you raise it volume a little bit? My voice is not that ليس مدويا كالدكتور عصام ما شاء الله. So it's not easy to come after great speakers and after dinner, which I hope that everybody will be awake and paying a little bit of attention while we will be talking and discussing this very, very important subject. Alhamdulillah, I would like to congratulate all of us as Libyans and Libyan Americans, and I would like to congratulate our country, adopted country here, the United States of America, for a great job, for a job well done. And we would like to congratulate our brothers and sisters in Libya who fought for a long time, who persevered and worked very hard, and finally stood up and rise and fought the injustice and ended the rule of tyranny in Libya. But that was the first part. I think we did the job of getting rid of a regime. Now we have the responsibility and the challenge to build a better regime, to build a better government, to build a better society, to build a better Libya, which is not easy. I think sometimes getting rid of a dictator is the easiest part, regardless of how much sacrifice we have seen, but that will be, and that is an easier part. Building what's right is always tougher than getting rid of what's wrong. And it's a challenge for us in Libya, because what we will do in the next few months and a few years will determine how this country, the country of Libya, will be for the next few generations and for the next hundreds of years. As we remember, we are sitting here in a country, the United States of America, that has been started as a revolution over 200 years, and it's still work in progress. MashaAllah, it's a great work, but we are looking to emulate what's good of this experience. So I will start by saying Libya is the second independence. The first independence in Libya was in 1951, and the second independence, when Libya got its real independence, it's this independence. And while we get this, the independence, transitioning to a democracy, it's a different story. The first independence, we fought the Italians. We suffered. Half of the Libyan populations were sacrificed, but we were able to get an independence. But we didn't do a great job of building the society, building democracy, giving what limited resources and tools we had at that time. And the result was not something that we will think about right now. Let's talk about a very quick modern history of Libya. Libya was giving an independence. It's voting on in 1949, and the resolution 289 was passed, which promised Libya an independence within 2 years. So this is not the first time for Libyans to go to the United Nations. We are a creature of the creation of the United Nations, which is good. it shows that the United Nations, 2 times, Libya proved that the United Nations can work if it works right. The first Libyan constitution was adopted by an appointed constituent assembly in 1951. I wanted to go through this because we will be talking about some of these issues in the next few minutes. I want you to keep them in mind. In December 1951, December 24th, 1951, the United Kingdom of Libya was declared as a sovereign state. It was a federal monarchy made of 3 provinces, Cyrenaica, Tripolitania, and Fezzan. In 1963, the federal system of government was abolished, and in line with that came one country, the Kingdom of Libya. Unfortunately, in 1969 came Gaddafi and a coup d'etat. The question, how did we manage the first transition and why we ended up with Gaddafi? This is something that we have to learn as experience. This is not a critique of the old regime, of the monarchy, which is we should be criticizing from time to time. We should learn from our own experiences, because it's very hard to learn from, if you can't learn from your own experience, it will be hard to learn from others. So how did we manage the first transition to democracy? Let's see. We had no money and no human resources at that time. There was no oil. There are very few college graduates in Libya. Libya just came out of war. It was part of Second World War. It was a devastating war. So when we got our independence, we went through some difficulties. And these difficulties that I am listing right here, they impacted what kind of change, what kind of transition that we ended up with. And that was Gaddafi's coup was an outcome of our shortcomings of the first transition in our country. In 1952, there was a ban on political parties. So if you don't have political parties, how can you grow democracy and establish democratic rule? The National Constitutional Party was outlawed, and the leader of that party was kicked out of the country. He was deported. He was sent to exile. In 1952, 1956, and 1965, there were elections with no parties, no real civil society, no real vibrant media. And the results, we have some elections, but the elections were fraud. In 1954, there was a constitutional crisis. There was a conflict between the king and the prime ministers, and resulted in the king decreed that the local council of Tripoli should be dissolved. There was a crisis, and the king, rahimahullah, he went against the Supreme Court in Libya and insisted on his decision, and that set back the independence judiciary in Libya for quite some time. In 1954, due to some problems, assassinations, and so on and so forth, of one of the royal families, and some crisis within the ruling government and the king, there was a state of emergency was declared. In 1963, 1964, 1965, 1967, students were demonstrating against corruption, against a lack of participation, against so many other things of ills that we had in the countries. In 1968, there was a trial of 106 people who were accused of being members of a party. Do you remember? This is something that's deja vu after the revolution, after the coup. They were accused of being a member of the Arab nationalist movement. At that time, the kingdom was so afraid of the impact of Nasser and of the nationalistic Ban Arab movement They were ready to fight it by arresting and harassing students and people who may have subscribed to that point of view. In 1964, there were restrictions on freedom, and of course, there were problems of corruption, nepotism, tribalism, regionalism. That was part of our first transition. What was the result and the impact of our not so successful transition in the first time? There we go. What have we seen? 1969. It took us 42 years to go from photo number 1 to photo number 3. What was the price? That is the price. 42 years plus all the blood and sweat that we can look at. Remember these images as we will be traveling through our next chance as Libyans to build a better country. Our second chance, a new transition for a new Libya. So, what now? Gaddafi is dead, so what we do? Should we keep our arms? Should we fight each other? Should we look at our own tribes? Should we look for our own regions? Should we learn from our mistakes? Or should we repeat the same old mistakes again and expect different results? What is the definition of insanity? Is anybody? Doing the same things, expecting different results. And I think we learn our lessons the hard way. So throw away our weapons and build a new Libya. The key word is building. Building is a very, very, very important thing. As I was talking today to a few of the Libyan involved in political parties and civil society in Tripoli, in Benghazi, this afternoon, they were talking about everybody's building party, everybody putting together some alliances. I said the first thing we have to remember, let's build a house, then fight over the rooms. If we don't have a house, there is nothing to fight over. So it's very, very important that we build a house, we build a good house with all the amenities, with all what we need, then we can decide who will take what room and who will be the head of the house for what time and for how long. So Libyan thought they have a revolution, they decide to reject that regime after all this time. As it was mentioned, they chose a National Transition Council, leadership, they put their faith in that leadership. It was amazing. So many people, they were amazed how everything came together for the Libyans. And that's why I remember one of the old former prime ministers of Libya, he said, Wallahi, Allah ما ظلمنا ما قصرش معانا نحن الليبيين. عرفت؟ يعني God did his best for us and with us. And it will be our responsibility to do right by ourselves and by our future generations. So the NTC, anticipating that after the revolution, after the liberation, there had to be a roadmap, a timetable, and they tried to come together. Of course, the international community expected the Libyans to have their act together and to tell everybody where will be they heading and how will they get there. So two things came out. There is something called the Declaration of the Constitutional Declaration after the NTC was chosen, and it led the period during the liberation. the NTC chose an executive council. Everybody, I'm sure, heard of Dr. Jibril and Tarhouni and others, and they were part of the executive office that should manage the conflict, إدارة الأزمة. At the same time, the NTC decided to come together and form a committee to, since they cannot put together a constitution because it's not their responsibility, they are not authorized to come with a constitution. It's the right of the people, not the right of the few. So they came up with what they call the Constitutional Declaration. It's a document that should manage the affairs of the Libyans throughout the conflict until they get to a point where they can elect their own leadership, and then they start the process of a constitution, choosing what kind of system, and so on and so forth, to build a country. That constitutional declaration, within it, there is some kind of a roadmap, and the roadmap decides how can we move from point A to point B, and so on and so forth, and also with a timetable. There are some questions about the roadmap. There are some questions about the timetable, since they were chosen, or they were put together during the time of the conflict itself, not anticipating some changes, not anticipating what happened after the liberation itself. The new challenges, the new realities that we are facing right now. The liberation was declared on October 23rd of last year, and the process started. The NTC, after deliberation and discussion and haggling and jumping up and down and pulling hairs, whoever has one, and they came up with an interim government. Question was, what kind of a government? That was a very important question. Should it be a government of bureaucrats, or should it be a government of politicians? My suggestion to them, as they were asking me, among other people they were asked, I suggest that it should be a government of bureaucrats. Because we have an experience in Iraq where the government was chosen was a government of politicians, and then end up dividing the government through their own, according to their own political alliances or their own religious sects. So the government was set up. We all know the government headed by Dr. Abdel-Rahim Al-Kib. Interesting for us as Libyan Americans and Libyan Europeans and Libyans in the diaspora, good number of these in this government are from within the diaspora. That should give you a little bit incentive to understand and to help, think about what kind of role the Libyan in the diaspora can play, should they choose to do so. With the government in place, the NTC decided to go through forming an election committee. Since the time between the declaration of liberation and what the roadmap said should be the election of a national council is around what, 6 months, 8 months. June should be the time. So the process of drafting an election law that should govern the election. The questions then among so many Libyans inside the country and outside the country, should we have an election law first, or should we have a party law that govern party and the parties within the country, the political parties within the country? And the reflection of the election law reflected that there is some kind of an understanding it has to be reached, that there's some view that the country is not ready, the political parties are very weak, There is a fear that there are a couple of other parties may be stronger and may take over everything if they will just keep it, the election to be part of, within the political parties only. So they came up with a mix. Another question came, what is the percentage, the quota? Should we give a woman quota, or should we allow them and ask them to participate as individuals like everybody else? The NTC, it came up with a 10%, even though Libyan women are 50%, some they said maybe 52% of the population. Of course, civil society organizations, they were not happy. Most of us were not happy, and we asked for change. Some asked for 20%, some asked 25%. Ultimately, they came up with what is called mix, where names in any palette has to go alternate, a man and a woman, a man and a woman. Maybe it should have been a woman and a man, and a woman and a man. Of course, that's hoping that people will vote. There are some problems with that too, as there are problems with any law. The question is that we're still navigating our way. Everything has to be negotiated, which is a good thing. The other thing that, in my opinion, should be kept in mind, that we should not hurry ourselves into hasty decisions. If the time needs to be expanded, let's take our time. We want to move together instead of having some of us moving where others are sitting and complaining, and after the complaint there may be conflict or issues. So we are building a country. We are not deciding on our own, and it's very, very important that we move as people, as the Libyan people together, and we should not be hasty in our decisions. Of course, the election should result in the electing the General National Council. The General National Council will take over from the NTC, and the NTC will cease to exist, and it will more or less have the same roles and responsibility of the Transitional National Council. Plus, appointing a committee or group of people, or choosing some group of people or a committee or a commission to draft a constitution. The constitution should be put to discussion. The election commission the constitution eventually it has to be approved by the people, and with that it will govern the new country. Constitution, a lot of people think of the Constitution as a legal document. The Constitution, brothers and sisters, is not a legal document. It is a political document before it's anything of any legal, because it decides what is the agreement among the different elements of the society. They have to come together. They say, this is how we want to be, this is who we are, this is how we want our government to be, this is how we would like to be governed, this is how we should divide different authorities, this is who should do what, and so on and so forth. So it's very important to have that kind of process of taking our time and coming up with the right constitution. South Africa, for example, took them more than 5 years to come up with a constitution. They were not in a hurry. Others, they worked a little bit to tweak an old constitution and took their time to come up with a new constitution. We have to take our time. We have to discuss it. We have to be sure what we would like to do and what direction we would like to take. Because once we have a constitution, it will be very hard to change. And if people may not like the constitution, they will fight very hard to change, and that may not help a lot. With that, there will be a new election. Of course, the General National Council will have to appoint another transitional government after they take over. This is in Arabic. I'm not going to go through this, but it's self-explanatory. I have a copy of that here. Who would like to read it in Arabic? Yeah, I think if we look at number 1, for example, that's the Declaration of the Liberations. Within 30 days, they have to come and move to the second phase, which is المجلس الانتقالي إلى طرابلس ويشكل حكومة. After that, within 60 days, they have to come up with the قانون الانتخابات, and after that, within 5 months, they have to choose the National مؤتمر الوطني العام of 200 people. And 30 days after that, what I can say is a lot of 30 days, a lot of 50 days, and I mean 60 days. Time is very short. That's all I can say. I am not very, personally, I am not very excited about the timetable of our transition, because it's very compacted, very short, very unrealistic. So we have to prepare ourselves for the possibility that we may have to make some changes and amend these times to give ourselves a little bit of time, because every expert that I've talked to said you guys are really pushing yourselves to a corner in terms of time, and there is no need for you to be so rushed in time making these general decisions. The second phase of the democratization process is the Article 30 of the Constitution. Some of these slides, by the way, are credit to Sister Azza Al-Maghur. I took her permission. I obtained her permission to use some of them. I would like to thank her for that. She gave an excellent presentation a few weeks ago at the Carnegie Endowment. So we'll see from the NTC to the General Council for 200 to the Parliament. Very simple on paper, not so simple in reality. And I think the Libyan people will be relying on a lot of your brains and your activities and your suggestions to help navigate this very difficult time. The conclusion of this process: a real democratic transition is taking place in Libya, despite serious hurdles that include not only the widespread position of arms, the freedom fighter integrations, the unachieved national reconciliation. We will have transition, and we would like to make sure that transition, the second transition, our second chance, will be successful, inshallah. NTC itself, which is an impediment to the democratization process due to its inability and lack of knowledge, experience, inclusiveness, and transparency. Of course, some of the NTC might disagree with me on this, but that's Azza Al-Maghur's assessment, and there is nothing wrong with that. We are all learning the process. So there is no shame in learning the process. The shame is when we see someone do something wrong and we insist on it. That will be a problem. And I think the NTC is a product of our Libya, as we are, product of the reality. They did a great job fighting Gaddafi and lead the fight for the liberation of Libya. They have not done the greatest job possible due to these shortcomings to manage the transitional process, the democratization process. And that should not be expected that everybody has to do the best all the time. That's where they have to rely on our expertise of others. They have to be open-minded and responsive to the suggestions and the criticism that the Libyan people may express. And I think it's very important to understand what we have seen in the last few months. Unfortunate events. There were some demonstrations. There are some unfortunate events, as I said, when people attacked. When there is no communication, problems will ensue. Seizing the momentum. The transitional period is a very precious opportunity to establish democracy. We all agree on that. Questions, how can we do it and be successful? We are not alone. We are not the first country that is going through transition to democracy. Some transition to democracy failed. Do you, brothers and sisters, know that 42% of countries that goes or went through civil wars or civil conflicts within the country itself, they will face a serious civil war within 10 years of that period? Almost 50%. So it is almost 50-50 chance, and we cannot afford to make the mistakes. It's an opportunity and a challenge at the same time. The preparation for the elections is a real test. I think, alhamdulillah, thank God, that Libya almost failed for the first election process when they try to push a law that was not in the best interest of what people felt should be. When the first draft of the election law came out, a lot of the civil society organization in Libya, outside Libya, all over the country, outside the country, they expressed their opinions. They offered alternatives. There are at least 4 or 5 alternatives to that, and I think the NTC was very wise to look at all these amendments, and they made good decisions. The NTC should learn from these mistakes, and I will not read the rest. You can read that. A difficult but operating transitional period. The transition is taking its own course. Sometimes you cannot control all the elements of any human activity. That's given. But given the fact that you are coming out of war, of 42 years of legacy of dictatorship, of tyranny. Somebody told me when I was in Tripoli in December, he looked at me and I expected him to do some, as a bureaucrat, to do some work, you know, that was expected of him. He said, "Brother, Gaddafi is not dead. Gaddafi is still alive in Libya." And I said, "Okay. And we are backward people." He said that too. And I said, no, we are not a backward people. Gaddafi is dead, but what he was talking about, Gaddafi's legacy. There was somebody who was down in Libya and said, Gaddafi booby-trapped the country. Whatever you see an outcome. You see a cast of a shadow of how people think, how people react, how people try to think about problem solving, dealing with the realities of a country, working with bureaucracies that we have. It's not easy to deal with that kind of legacy and expect everything to change. And that's one of the major changes we have to think about. We have to be able to know our expectations, but also to manage these expectations. And I think if there is one of the major failures of the NTC, and I say that with our esteemed guest here, because I mentioned that to them too, that their failure to communicate, that's what somebody said that before, the communication. If you don't communicate with the people, if you don't tell them what do you want to do and how are you taking them with them, how you are going to get there, And why do you want to get there? Take them with you. They will be left behind in one place, and you as a leadership will be moving in a different direction, and the gap will increase and widen continuously, and that will lead to distrust